Okay, the original meaning of a fraction is a piece of something. And so normally you think of a piece of something as being less than the whole thing. Okay? And so if you have like for instance, a piece of pie, you cut a piece out of a whole pie, the piece you take would be considered to be a proper fraction. And a proper fraction is less than 1. So less than the whole thing. Okay? If I had fractions of a pie, but I had a bunch of them that were added up to more than the whole pie, that would be called an improper fraction. That would be if you have greater than or equal to one whole pie. So if you took the whole thing, that's not a piece of it, that's the whole thing. Or if you have more than the whole thing, like for instance, a proper fraction would be something like 2/3. The number on top is smaller than the number on the bottom. I cut something into 3 pieces, like here, and then I take 2 of them, okay? So that's still less than the whole pie. But what if I had something like 5/3? Here I have the size of a third, and I have that size piece, but I have 5 of them. I'm clearly getting the other pieces from somewhere other than this same pie. And this would be something called an improper fraction. That's supposed to be an n. So an improper fraction is sort of an extension of the idea of a fraction to numbers that are greater than 1. Now, first thing I want to say is there's nothing improper about an improper fraction. It's a perfectly good way to represent this number. However, there are times that you want to convert this into a whole number and a fractional part. And so that would be called a mixed number. So let's look at how to convert an improper fraction into a mixed number. So if I take my 5/3, and if I actually do the division, so this means 5 divided by 3. So let's take 5 and divide it by 3. And instead of carrying out the remainder as a decimal, we're going to express the remainder as a fraction. So 3 goes into 5 once. 3 times 1 is 3. Then I subtract and I get 2. And so then I write the remainder as a fraction. So 5/3 is the same thing as 1 2/3. Now, this kind of notation is very common to use, but I think of this as sort of a mixed up notation because 1 2/3, if you think of it, if you read it carefully, you say 1 2/3, it really means 1 plus 2/3. So it's really the sum of a whole number and a fraction. This is the way you write it. So one time you want to use mixed numbers is if you have a length of something, and I lay it up against a ruler, and say here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and maybe this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a quarter more. So this might be 1/4 here. So you'd say 5 1/4, and that way you know how many marks to count and then how much is left over, and then you're just reading the fraction in that last inch. Okay, so this is the kind of application where mixed numbers make sense. The reason it's good to leave numbers as improper fractions in algebra in particular is very frequently in algebra the problems you're doing, you do the first part of a problem and the results lead into another problem and the results lead into another problem. And so if you leave numbers in improper fraction form, they're easier to use in the next step. And so I just typically leave them alone. Converting into this form really only makes sense when you're ready to get the final answer and write it down and then maybe do a measurement using that. Okay? So if you have an improper fraction, this is the way you handle it. You do the division that's indicated, 5 divided by 3, or whatever divided by whatever, and you write the remainder as a fraction. So the remainder over the divisor would be the fractional expression of the remainder. So that's your 1 2/3. Okay, that's how you convert from improper fractions to mixed numbers. I'll do a separate video on how you convert from mixed numbers to improper fractions.